Running an online business requires passion, knowledge, and a lot of dedication. Adding the complexities of setting up and managing hosting for your website piles on more work when you already have so many plates spinning. Whether you manage one WordPress website or dozens, Kinsta's managed solutions give you access to a platform that's optimized for the fastest speed, has enterprise-grade security features, and is powered by an intuitive custom dashboard with everything you need to manage your sites efficiently. Plus, Kinsta provides human-only WordPress expert support, which is available 24/7, 365 to assist with even the most complex sites. Forget frustrating AI chatbots. Kinsta gives you complete peace of mind by ensuring that your WordPress sites are always online, secure, and performing at their best. Start your journey with Kinsta today and get your first month free. Don't have time to migrate your site? Kinsta takes care of everything for you. Learn more at kinsta.com/podcast. That's KINSTA.com/podcast.
They most likely their role or their scope within the company will change so that at least they have some freshness or newness in their activity to keep them energized and not bored. So that's another aspect. There might be a perfect way of implementing that process, but there might be a realistic way that might be more relevant, which might involve understanding the people who are actually going to be executing in that process and what are their subtleties that are relevant to that process. There's no one size fits all. So you should actually, especially if you're going through the due diligence process of buying a business, really try and understand that person in more subtler detail than just what they might be saying at surface level or what you might be reading.
Hello and welcome to the How2Exit Podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. This episode of How to Exit is brought to you by Final Ascent, the boutique M&A firm helping lower middle market business owners achieve their ultimate exit. At Final Ascent, they know selling your business is one of the biggest decisions you'll ever make, and they've been in your shoes. Their team isn't just made of advisors. They're experienced business owners who have successfully navigated their own exits. Final Ascent specializes in preparing businesses for sale, building value, and connecting with a national network of qualified buyers who will compete for your business. They don't take on a client unless they're confident they can sell your business at the current market maximum value. Whether you're ready to sell now or planning for the future, they'll craft a roadmap tailored to your unique goals so that you can walk away with maximum value and a peace of mind. Start your journey today at Final Ascent. That's www.finalascent.com, because your next chapter starts with a successful exit. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How2Exit Podcast. I'm here with Ashish Gupta, and he is the founder. I'm reading your bio and seeing your co-founder of the other stuff, but you are the founder of Scale Up Exec. Did I get your name right?
Perfect. You got it just right.
Okay, cool. I have a running record of being horrible on names. For the first probably 6 months I ran this podcast, I don't care if your name was John Smith, I butchered it. So I'm getting better. I'm working on it. I love unique names. It just shows how diverse the world is. So thank you for being here today. Let's just kind of get into this.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being here. Thanks for having me.
We always start with the origin story and you have a really cool one. You've started some really cool things. You've sold some stuff, been part of some major companies. Kind of tell us how you got into this space.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in tech most of my career. I was previously the co-founder of a wireless company, and it was one of those starting in a garage type of stories, and we had no money, and we worked through a lot of interesting things, came up with some of the first technology that now you see in cell phones everywhere with wireless charging. And eventually, after a lot of struggles, we built up that company. It was acquired by Qualcomm, which is a company based out of San Diego. After that, I had the chance to work at Apple. I was in management there, managing a big portion of the iPhone operations in the manufacturing supply chain there, and was there for about 5 years. Very fascinating just to see the scale of things in iPhone in the iPhone world. There's probably no product that's bigger than iPhone, and so it was kind of fascinating to see that and to work through that. And I managed a $2 billion a year budget, and my goal was to not spend $2 billion a year. So we did all kinds of interesting things to reduce the spend across the whole manufacturing landscape. Eventually, I had the entrepreneurial bug again. I took a chance on myself, quit Apple, and acquired a distressed e-commerce business. And it was a business that had been declining for the prior 2 years, and I didn't know much about the e-commerce space at that point, and spent 4 or 5 quite painful years in turning everything around in that business, from the team culture, the supply chain, the B2B sales channels, B2C sales channels. Eventually, it did turn around. It was acquired in April of 2023. After that, I had the chance to help a couple of small, medium-sized businesses as a fractional COO. So these were businesses where the founders, the CEOs, they'd hit a skill set ceiling. Their businesses had plateaued. They were burnt out. The teams were burnt out. And so I jumped in and retweaked a lot of different areas from bottom to top of these businesses. Within 3 or 4 months, the revenues grew 30-40%. And it was just amazing to see the type of impact you could have in the small, medium-sized business space very quickly. So because of that success, I had more engagements than I could handle myself, and so started this firm, Scale Up Exec, and it's a firm of fractional COOs. These are really the people that out of the hundreds of COOs I met through the years, these are what I find to be the most skilled people who've scaled businesses from 0 to 8, 9 figures, gotten them to exit point. They've worked through a lot of turnaround situations. They worked in both small startups as well as in large enterprises. And it's a small team right now. There's 7 of us on the team. And we work across a lot of different contexts to help businesses turn around and many times get them to exit point. Yeah. So that's a bit background on myself.
Yeah, a lot of people, I think, underestimate the role of a COO. A lot of businesses, almost all businesses, will have somebody handling operations. If they don't, they're in trouble. But calling it a chief operating officer and having somebody make sure that the day-to-day operations and the scalability and all the day-to-day functions perform is critical. The reason I kind of hesitate on the whole conversation is I've evaluated and looked at probably in excess, probably 300-400 now, maybe more, quite a bit of small businesses. And when you're under that $5 million range, I don't think I've seen but 1 or 2 have a CEO. And if you really look at them, somebody's taken the role on, right? Usually, if I find a company that's doing really well, I can identify 2 people fairly quick. There's a visionary, somebody has ideas and just kind of just solves problems and gets stuff done. And then there's somebody that kind of reins that guy in and keeps him under control a little bit and makes sure the day-to-day operations happens. There's a guy or a girl who has that chief operating role, whether or not they have the true title of it or the salary of it. There's somebody there that says, this is the way the widget's supposed to turn to get the money to come into the bank account to make sure the bills are paid and the employees get their payroll, right? So.
Exactly. And it's actually kind of fascinating that you say that, because from what I've seen, most people, probably 90% of people are either that visionary type or they're an execution type. There's very few, maybe 10% of people that are really skilled in both areas. And most people think that they're skilled in both areas, but actually they either are skilled in one of those two, or that's where they draw their energy from, one of those two. And it's important to recognize that and become aware of, where do I fit in? And it's okay if I don't have everything in me. I just find the right person to complement the areas that I don't get energy from, or I don't have the skill set in.
So if you don't know that, a lot of people, that they understand why they're floundering around as a business or they're not succeeding in the way they should, is often if they don't have somebody in that operational role. Yeah. They don't have somebody that says, hold on, this thing over here makes a lot of money. Why don't we just keep churning that wheel and make that thing, perform better and turn a little faster and generate that same, this widget turns, if it turns 3 times clockwise, it generates $1,000. Well, let's get 5 people making sure that doesn't ever stop turning, right? To where you get a guy like me, a visionary, is like, oh, we've turned that twice. Let's go focus on this over here, right?
Yeah.
And I'll be, no, that other one makes a lot of money. Yeah, but this will too. So as a visionary, we can be distractors, right? And we almost always need to pair up with an operator like you or somebody who's had that operational experience and knows, like, wait a second, if this thing's going to succeed, certain things have to be done on a systematic approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me about the what in your mind gives a business the ability to exit. Let's talk about coming in as a chief operating officer, taking a look at a company and making it perform or turning it around. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think first is to understand, especially when we're talking about small, medium-sized business space where there's really a founder who's been deeply ingrained with that business for a long time. It's first important to understand what is the ambition or the goal of that founder or CEO. For many businesses, that founder is actually interested in having a money-making machine that just keeps on churning, a wheel that keeps on churning, and it's not necessary for them to grow it. But they're interested in having something that can support their lifestyle. There's other founders who are interested in growth, and some of them are interested in extreme growth at all costs. So it's really important to understand what is really the goal or objective of that founder. And that goal also changes over time. Like, let's say a founder has a significant life event, they have their first child, or they get married, or whatever else. Then sometimes those goals also change. So it's important to understand the founder's personal ambition, how it intersects with their personal life, their business intersects with their personal life. And then that's the starting point. From there, now you can start based on that objective, now working through, okay, if that's where you want to get to in X number of years, now how do we work backwards? So, like, for example, let's say if somebody is interested in having a business that just keeps on churning and they want to have less involvement in the business. So that could mean that maybe the exit is not necessarily an exit of them out of the company. It might be an exit of their involvement day to day. So it might be that, okay, let's make sure that the right team, the management team, is in place. Do we have all the key people that are needed to keep this wheel churning and are also able to think through when things start going south? At some point, a business, there'll be competitive pressure that comes in. There'll be some customer pressure that comes in, whatever else. Some changes will be needed or some innovation will be needed. So do we have the right people in place that don't just keep on churning the wheel, but can also think, can analyze, can see, is some adjustment needed? And so now if you've got that right set of people in the team, now you can actually start extrapolating this founder CEO out of their current hands-on role and into maybe more of a board level role or maybe like an advisory level role. So that could be one type of exit. There could be an exit where somebody gets out completely from ownership of the business as well as involvement in the business, and now that'll take a different trajectory. There could be there could be a lot of different scenarios. There could even be bringing in other partners that now get more involved and maybe have skill set that this founder does not have that could help scale the business. And now their involvement becomes much more focused on certain areas rather than the whole business. So like this, I think it's important for me not to have a one-size-fits-all approach, but to really understand that context and then now start solving based on that context.
When I first got into this space, 300 interviews ago, we're about 320 interviews into this podcasting world now, that when we first got into this space, I was convinced that most of us would be buying almost all businesses from 75 plus year old people who need to retire, right, or divorcees or something medically happens. What I've learned over time is there's a second class of individuals, and especially in the tech space, it's very common. And through interviewing brokers and people who do a lot of deals in this space, there is that second group of, I'd say they're 28 to 35, just got married, and they're having their first kids on the way, and they don't want to pull 60, 80-hour weeks on a startup. They want to sell it, have a little bit of change in their pocket, and reassess what they're going to do because they have a child on the way and they want that free time. I know a few brokers now that's what they focus on. They focus on the tech businesses in that realm. Do you in your experience, can you see that coming? Like, I know when we used to own the martial arts studios, and I helped out at the ones when I practiced and stuff. When there were times you could actually see things were about to happen. Right, if somebody's in their teens or like 16, 17, and they're starting to get very serious about a girlfriend, we know they're not going to train 3 days a week anymore. They're going to start dropping back because that person, that the other one's not going to come in unless they drag them along and train with them. We're going to lose. They're not going to continue, training. Or if they get married and a kid's on the way, we just know they're not going to continue training the way they used to train. They're going to fade out, and you're going to lose that student. I imagine there's some life events you can see coming down the road when you're with these founders you're working with. Like, okay, they're getting married. He needs to have less time at the office. He's not going to be able to pull 60, 80-hour weeks like he has been.
Yep.
Is that
Yeah,
true,
definitely.
or can you see things coming down the pipe?
Yeah, definitely. I think life events are a big aspect of that. But there's also another one which I've seen a lot with uh, sub 45-year-olds, which is just boredom. Where after 4 or 5 years, most people under 45, from what I've seen, they get bored. And it's not like how it used to be 30, 40 years ago where you have a lifelong job. And this is the same in the corporate world as well. If you have a job within 4 or 5 years, you're going to start getting some level of boredom. You might start thinking, what else? Where else? And that
Hmm.
same thing happens with entrepreneurs as well. So I find that it's a bit rare for somebody to stay in the same business now that's in this younger age range for more than 5, 6, 7 years. And even if they are, then they most likely their role or their scope within the company will change, so that at least they have some freshness or newness in their activity to keep them energized and not bored. So that's another aspect.
The boredom also leads to that shiny object syndrome, right? Where you start this little side project. You're bored. You start this side project over here. I probably can count over a dozen companies where I talked to, and the reason they were selling is because their side project took off, and it's making as much or more money or on a better trajectory than their main employee. Saying they're usually ill planned to sell because they want to keep the employee. They want to basically sell you IP, or sell you everything but the employees. And I was like, okay, that's not how this is going to work.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with you know that group of people? You see them starting to get bored, right?
Yeah.
If you're a CEO in a company and you're spending time on these things, you're going to start to see the indicators. Wait a second, this guy seems pretty bored with this whole subject.
Yeah.
We better gear this for a sell. We better gear this for some a faster transition. How do you handle that conversation with the founder?
Yeah, firstly, it's quite easy to observe that when you come into a business, you'll start seeing very quickly the difference between somebody who's really engaged in their business versus somebody who's starting to get disengaged. And the tricky part with boredom is that majority of the time, from what I've seen, the business will eventually suffer. As soon as the founder or CEO starts getting disengaged from the business, it might not just be that they're not catching things themselves, but it might be that their disengagement now starts flowing into the rest of the team. The rest of the team starts observing that. It now starts changing the culture of the company, and now even team members start getting disengaged or less enthusiastic or motivated. It's very rare to have a whole team that's super motivated, but the person who's in the leadership role is not motivated or engaged. It's very rare for that to happen. That would be amazing if that was a possibility, but it's rare. So that means that it is really important for somebody who's an entrepreneur, as soon as they themselves start observing some disengagement within themselves, to be honest and open that this is a possibility and it's okay for that to happen. For most humans, that's a natural part of their career, their career life cycle. And as soon as you observe that, then now you start seeking some help in, or at least you yourself start putting together plans to compensate for that. So whether that means changing your role, getting other people to come in and take over your role, or getting to an exit point for the business itself. Because at some point, it's going to actually result in a lower outcome or worse outcome for an exit if you've been disengaged for some time now. So it is important that as soon as, let's say if the CEO founder hasn't observed it themselves and now you come in as a CEO or just a team member in the company and you observe that, to have that open and honest conversation and to even let them know, here's what type of impact this could have on your team, on your team's culture, on the business, on the performance of the business. And everybody is interested in having a positive outcome for an exit for a business. So I think in most situations where I've had that conversation, people are quite open and they start having, taking that conversation forward.
A lot of these guys, a lot of people I run into, they are really great at creating something, right? They're really good at creating an idea. They have a software, they have, a device that they can create, and they can take it up to a certain point, but they're not the guy to take it to the next level. And you see this in the VC world where a VC a venture capitalist or a private equity company will come in and they'll replace the CEO, they'll replace somebody, get it to the next level, right? As a business owner, how do you have that conversation with somebody? Go, look, you were great at making this and taking it to where you're at now, but if you want to go bigger, we're going to need somebody that has had that experience.
Yep. And this is a very difficult conversation in pretty much every scenario that I've had, because people are very emotionally tied to the business that they've started. And they may have been there for several years. And so now they're even deeper, their connection is even deeper to that business. And so now if you want to extract them from their role or their position, it's quite challenging. So in many cases, we've taken it in baby steps. Like I found that instead of saying, okay, let's get you out of this role completely and now let's swap in somebody else, that's usually too dramatic for somebody to be able to take, even for their ego to be able to take. And so instead, it's better to start off with small things. And you really, you as a COO could, or like an intermediary, you could first try and build trust that when something gets taken away from that CEO, that things don't just fall apart, that they actually work well. So normally what I like to do is I take one small thing that's currently on the plate of the CEO and identify that, okay, it's not necessary for them to do it, or somebody else on the team has that skill set and they could do it well, or they could even do it better than the CEO is currently doing. And you take that small little thing, come up with a nice transition plan, put in a bunch of metrics to make sure that things don't actually fall apart, and make sure that that it's not just a one-time training, but that there's an ongoing like connection between the CEO and the person who's taking this over, so that they can ensure any extra feedback that's needed is given and provided. So overall, just having a really nice, well thought through transition plan for that with nice metrics and accountability mechanisms in place. Now, after like a 3-4 weeks of that CEO seeing that, oh, this thing came off my plate and things are working well, nothing has fallen apart, that starts building trust in you as an intermediary, as well as just the concept of taking things off of their plate. And now once you have that trust, now you can add on more and take on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And eventually you can roll into a whole new role or a new person that comes into the team. So I like this kind of baby step approach. It's not necessary all the time. Sometimes you don't have the time to be able to do something like that. And you need to make quicker transitions. In that case, you need different strategy. But when there is a little bit of time available, then I like the baby step approach.
I've seen business owners where, we're talking to them on the phone and they're like, yeah, I'd like to hang around and help out, but I just kind of needed my hours to be reduced. And you're like, okay, what does a reduction in hours look like? And they go, yeah, I'd like to be able to just come in 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a second, how many hours are you coming in? And one of them we were talking to, he's like doing 60 to 80. And I was like, okay, we're looking at 2 to 3 people because nobody is going to come off the street. What takes a person 60 hours a week that's been doing it for 5 or 6 years, then take the next guy 75 or 80 because he's not as efficient, right? He's got a learning curve. He's not going to be as proficient. He's not going to be as good at doing those particular tasks. What you explained on that baby step approach, how long does it take to take a CEO role, a guy who's pulling 3 or 4 positions and has 3 hats on? He's doing sales, he's doing customer support, and happens to be the maintenance guy because he can walk through the factory and hear the machine vibrating wrong and knows what it needs, right? There's these guys, these guys have been in these businesses for so long, they wear all the hats. How long does it take to, I'm leading up to this question because I'm curious on, are we setting our transition periods right when we're looking at buying these companies, right?
Yeah. I think that transition period, there's also no one answer for every scenario. It really depends on how open. Pretty much most CEOs, they'll say that they're open to transition. They'll say that they're open to letting go of things that are on their plate. But the reality you might find to be different when you actually start taking things off, even in baby step method. So actually you have to be very watchful. And you have to be very careful about aware and just see how things are going. And sometimes you might have to, if things are going too slow, you might force, come in and force stop and say, okay, no, now we need to make this transition faster. So I think there's no one size fits all. So you should actually, especially if you're going through the due diligence process of buying a business, really try and understand that person in more subtler detail than just what they might be saying at surface level or what you might be reading in a prospectus about them. Actually, also to go back to your point around a founder or CEO who's working 60 hours or 80 hours, it's rare to find that somebody who's working 60 or 80 hours is truly doing productive, impactful work for 60 to 80 hours, like completely, 100%. You'll often find that they're working, they're putting in those hours, they're sitting in a chair for those hours, but actually only some portion of those hours are actually needle moving work for the business. A lot of them might be, like I've seen many CEOs, founders, they're involved in bookkeeping tasks that really are not moving the needle for the business. Or they're doing a bunch of things that they think are really important. But once you start analyzing the data, you'll find that, oh, actually, why are we even doing this in the first place? It's not making any difference to the business. And so instead of just blanket thinking that, okay, this person is doing 60 to 80 hours, and so now let's just find 2 to 3 people to take over their work, it's actually better to first understand all of the work that they're currently doing. Is it useful? Is it impactful? And is it moving the needle? And you can use techniques like time blocking, Pomodoro, try and introduce that into their work life so that they actually start doing work that's actually meaningful and is time bound. It's not just like they're sitting in the chair on top in front of a computer and just typing away, but actually they might not be doing anything that's that useful.
What does engagement with you look like? If somebody came in and said, hey, I've got this business, it's not doing as good as it used to, let's just pick a number. It's like, I'd like to see it sell at 10 million. We're doing 2 million now. We were at 3 million or 2.5 million now. We were doing 3 million last year, and I don't know what's going wrong, right? What is the engagement process? How long does it take for you to kind of come in and analyze a business and go, okay, I do believe myself or one of my people can really make this work and hit their goals?
Yeah. So firstly, the way that our engagement process is, I first try and meet with that CEO or founder and understand the real situation. And I've done this now quite a few times. So I've got a way of trying to understand what the reality is in a business. And everybody has different goals and interests, but to understand from their goals to where they are right now, what kind of possibility exists and does it seem real? And then now, based on the type of, let's say they have a certain goal, like you're saying, they want to get to a 10 million exit, and they're at a certain point right now. I try and understand what are the gaps in the business that are preventing them from getting to that goal. So maybe the gaps are in their B2B sales side, maybe their gaps are in their operations or efficiency, or maybe their costs are not in control, their margins are not optimized. Or maybe their team or their culture, there's something that's not optimized there. So typically in that first month, if a CEO or founder doesn't already know what the roadblocks are, then in that first month, we'll do a deep dive into each of these areas: team, culture, revenue paths, cost, margins, and try and come up with, there might be 100 things in there that are gaps, but there's probably a few that could move the needle the fastest. So we'll try and identify which of these few that should be worked on first versus what are the things that could be worked on later. And now who in my team has that unique skill set to be able to bridge those gaps for that company. So different members of my team have different skill set. Many of them are very omnidextrous, so they can do a lot of different things. But there might be, if there's some certain specific unique gaps in a business, then certain members of the team might be more suited to help fill those gaps. So then once we get the agreement with the CEO founder that, okay, these are the best gaps to work on first, now we'll actually start working on the strategy and then actually roll up our sleeves and start executing to get us there. And let's say there's a long way to go and it takes 2 to 3 years to get us to exit point. Or let's say we're very close and now it's just some tweaking and fine tuning, and maybe an exit point or like starting to market ourselves for an exit might be nearer term, like in the next 6 months. Then we'll come up with different plans and execute based on those plans. But I found that it's quite important, when you're talking about small, medium-sized businesses, like you were saying, less than 5 million a year or whatnot, it's hard for them to have a full-time COO that is really skilled. They might be able to find a COO who's average skill or so, but there's a big difference. I found that somebody who's overqualified to work in a situation versus somebody who's typical skill set, that somebody who's overqualified can, in a shorter period of time, make a much bigger difference. They can move faster. The type of decisions that they make will be much better. They'll short circuit a lot of paths to growth. And that's why I thought this fractional space is kind of interesting, because a full timer, somebody, it kind of goes both ways. Somebody, a business who's like maybe 5 or 10 million a year may not be able to find a top skilled, might not be able to afford somebody who's really highly skilled to be their CEO. And then on the other end, somebody who's really skilled CEO, they probably won't want to work for a 10 or 15 or $20 million a year business. They could easily work for something much more interesting where their outcome might be more significant. But in the fractional space, now somebody who's really skilled could work with 4 different businesses, and it's actually kind of fascinating for them as well, because they get that, like you were saying, somebody who has ADHD, they love to get involved in a lot of different things, and in a small medium-sized business space you can make a difference so fast. So it's kind of like an adrenaline rush, in some ways. So now in the fractional space, you actually can get access to people who are interested in working in your size business and do it in a way that's affordable. So it's kind of a win-win for both the CEOs as well as for the businesses.
Now, you guys have tools and systems, and they're standardized across the industry you use, like you use EOS and those type of things, key performance indicators, dashboards, and all that, or do you have some custom system you guys like to build out and use inside?
Yeah, each of my team members are, of course, quite skilled in EOS and many of these other systems out there. But for me also, I never like to take a one-size-fits-all approach. Like EOS works for several different contexts, but not for every context. And same with many other operating systems. So I actually like to see, and each of my team members, they like to understand in detail what is the current situation of that business, and then what's the future state of that business, and what kind of system or tools or techniques or processes will be most suited for that specific context. So sometimes we take little bits from EOS and from other areas. Sometimes we custom develop our own methods or processes that are actually relevant for that business. So I'm rarely a one size fits all approach for anything. I like to see what's relevant, and then now we implement what's relevant for that business.
What's the typical, I guess there's no typical one, but what does a turnaround look like for you guys? Is there any time you look at a business and go, you know what, this thing's dying and it should die, you should just back away from it and leave it alone, right? Or are all businesses savable?
I don't think all businesses are savable, and sometimes that's partly to do with the skill set and the goals of that founder. So maybe if that skill set and interest or motivation of that founder is very aligned, then it might actually be savable. But if that interest of that founder, or like, for example, there's a business we're working in right now, it was losing a lot of money. It was losing 350K a month, and it's a company with around 100 people in the team. We jumped in and got it to net zero, and to a point where if they exit now, they could exit without having to declare bankruptcy, without having to. They could make all of their debts whole, and it's not the outcome that the CEO ever envisioned, but the skill set, the capabilities, the motivation level of that founder CEO, for us to get it to this point, I think is good, and that's reasonable enough for what is possible here. And I think it's actually a good decision to try for that CEO to exit without making anything, but also not losing anything. But there are other contexts where it is actually possible to turn around and get it to a point where of growth again, and then now when they exit, they actually might get something out of it. So it's also not necessary for every exit to be quote unquote a money making exit. Even getting it to a point where you don't have to declare bankruptcy could be a really interesting exit. Sometimes it actually might be relevant to declare bankruptcy and cut your losses as fast as possible and move on to the next thing. Again, it's important, at least for me, to understand the context and what's actually most relevant and useful for given that context.
So I've been working recently on a project, and one of the things on this project, instead of going out, and I usually go out and find a JV partner to be my CEO or equivalent, my operator, the guys that just make sure
Mhm.
day to day. Sometimes I even like I can find decent enough virtual assistants and stuff, and they're very system. If they're very OCD, as I like to call it, I like to find a really good OCD person that says, no, this widget goes here this way at this time of the day. That said, I'm trying to train AI now to be my operator, right? To at least be able to remind, kind of be a consultant. I'm giving it, I'm doing the training and giving it documents for one of the businesses, and giving it the documents, giving it the, everything I can to have it have an insight into it, and then telling it it's the operator. Its job is to create standard operating procedures to make sure that we are stable and growing and act as an advisor in that role. It's not there yet, right? But do you see AI as taking on some of this capability in the future?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of capability, and we're already using most people in most companies are already using it to help speed up things. At the moment, the things that it's not quite there with yet is relationships and understanding people, like the real subtleties of people. And to be a really good manager or leader, you have to be able to understand the subtleties of people. What's really their motivational factors? What are the things that might be demotivating them? Are they in the right seats for their skill set as well as motivational factors? And like, let's say you introduce a new process, there might be a perfect way of implementing that process, but there might be a realistic way that might be more relevant, which might involve understanding the people who are actually going to be executing in that process, and what are their subtleties that are relevant to that process. And so you might end up tweaking a process. Instead of it being perfect, you make it actually relevant to that set of people. So those kind of subtle things are really important in being an effective manager and an effective leader in an organization. And maybe one day that AI will be able to get to that level of understanding as well.
I think that the only one that understands or currently the only one I've found that's trying to understand human sentiment, tonality, and all that type of stuff is ChatGPT 4.5. It's actually a little scary how humanistic it is,
Mm.
right? You can have I have people role playing with it, meaning that they're acquisition entrepreneurs. They're needing to say talk to business owners, and maybe they're software engineers by trade or something else, and they just don't have the people skills that they really need to do this part of the task, right? To build a rapport, to have the first level conversations with off market deals. So I give them some prompts and I tell them, use ChatGPT in the voice mode to play role play, and it's really good at it. It's really scary how good it is. It'll build
Mm.
a backstory for you in a heartbeat and pretend to be the business owner, and and it does the right thing. But it was all monotone up until 4 or 5. And now with 4 or 5, it actually does it with enthusiasm on some points and gets excited about the heart of the conversation. And it's a little scary that like you'll lose track in your own mind that you're talking to a computer. At some point, we have to worry about once they turn it like they're messing with agents now, but they're saying in the next 2 to 3 years, it's coming for all of our jobs.
Yeah.
Right? It can have mine. I'm semi-retired. I'm doing this for fun and to give myself a sense of meaning and purpose. That said, with all the technology out there, what do you see as the danger zone or the like? Is it going to help you in your business and your career, or do you think there's some risk to what you're doing?
I think it's amazing. Technology is like speeding everything up. It's allowing a lot of things to happen that we previously couldn't even have time to do. And if it's done well, or it's utilized well, it can enhance every position that exists. So we use it extensively, and we're building a lot of AI tools for many of our customers to help them speed up a lot of the manual work that they used to be doing. So we're still kind of at that level where implementing AI to try and speed up manual work. But eventually, now to get to higher levels and higher degrees of thought process, that would be the next step. So overall, I'm very interested in seeing how things evolve and how we can continue to utilize. So I think it's only going to help.
Have you seen the industry reports like what do they call them? Is it Ibis World? Is that the word I'm thinking of? Where they have like industry research for, like, if I wanted to like look at, say, buying a manufacturing company that manufactures parts for machine shops or something like that. I bet in here there's an Ibis World, a report that's 30, 50, 60 pages deep that tells you the state of the industry, the history, and all that. But they're not on all of them, right? Like there's just like the one you can get them free on Search Funder and some other places. You can pay for them; they're expensive. But there are places that give these reports for free, right? I'm glancing at them now. There's acupuncturists in the United States. So, I mean, there's adhesive tape manufacturing, right? And you click on one of these reports, and it's really detailed. Up until recently, we were limited to whatever, 1,500 or so, maybe more, of the industry reports that are already done inside of the system. Now with AI and some of the tools out there, you can generate a similar report with deep research type tools in 15, 20 minutes with AI, and it'll be up to date and accurate. So if you're trying to figure out if a new industry was something you wanted to get into, or wanted you to, like, if you wanted to consult for a new industry and you didn't have anybody on there, to have an industry primer with a couple AI tools, you could get up to date so much faster than the week or two it had taken you before to do all that research, that PhD level research, to figure out, kind of, is this an industry we should be messing with or working with?
Yeah, and I even love like a notebook LM where you can just upload all that industry research and just ask it the specific questions that are relevant to you, and you'll extract everything that you need very quickly. So even understanding or comprehending data is going to become faster and faster.
It's funny, as I use that notebook.lm or notebook LM as a learning tool, right?
Yeah.
If I want to learn a new subject, like somebody wanted to get me into crypto, and I haven't messed with any of the crypto stuff whatsoever. And they're like, no, dude, you got to get into this. You got to get into this. So I found 5 or 6 really trusted PDF form ebooks that I trusted. I was like, okay, this guy's really doing it. It's making money, and I bought some of them stuff, and I shove them all in that. And the cool thing is, because I like podcasts, it creates a 25-minute audio clip that sounds like a podcast of 2 people discussing. I probably uploaded on that one 35 documents, about 4,000 pages. Like it was quite a bit of data, and it gave me a 25-minute conversation about all the data in there in the industry, and it's kind of like sitting through a mini lecture on it, and in a very conversational tone. I use it as a primer to learn new industries.
Yeah, right? It's amazing, fascinating tool.
So, what are the standard things you guys do now as a service for the companies? I know you've had quite a few experiences in the past and stuff, but let's just kind of explain to people what it looks like. How does a company figure out they need a chief operating officer or a fractional chief operating officer?
Yeah, typically, if you're very satisfied with how your company is going, and it's meeting the type of, or on the trajectory towards your own goals that you have as a owner or founder, then it's probably not relevant to have somebody like us come in. But if you feel that there's some gap between where your vision is for the business and the trajectory that it's going on right now, whether that's in, number 1, revenue, number 2, whether it's with cost or your supply chain or margins, and number 3, with your team or processes or culture, if you feel there's gaps in any of those 3 areas, then it might be relevant to look into bringing on some experts to help you. And we've kind of navigated a lot of these situations through the past on revenue, on margins, and team culture processes. And so we're able to quite quickly make a difference. Whatever your goals are, whether they're in terms of exit or not even an exit, you feel like there's some goals with continuing the operations of your business and you being there. It could even be on your own leadership capabilities or your ability to manage your team. If you feel there's some gaps in any of these areas, then you can get involved, get us involved, and we can help in getting you closing those gaps. And we can do it quite quickly because we've kind of seen it and done it many different times in a lot of different contexts. So it helps short circuit.
There's also the thing of they say is like you know what you know, but there's this whole concept you don't know what you don't know, right?
Mhm.
And having a very experienced chief operating officer or somebody who has been in your industry or been in, like for you guys, you have a lot of experience in the software world and device world. It sounds like, tech world. If I was a tech founder and I wanted to grow really fast, I may or may not be able to ask you the right questions. There may be things you could look at my company and see that I just don't see because I don't know what I don't know,
Yeah.
right? I have a friend who is a tech founder. He created a security device, and I just learned the other day that he go, well, I think we're shutting it down. We can't get sales to go through. I was like, cool. What have you tried? And I was like, well, they've run a bunch of, Facebook ads to landing pages and different stuff. I was like, why didn't you reach out to channel partners that already sell security devices? There are entire, value-added resellers that's all they sell, right? I come from the world. I was the IT guy for a long time. The IT manager who bought those devices. I bought the firewalls. I bought the networking equipment. I ran operations for some of the biggest websites on the planet. I don't ever remember necessarily buying anything directly from a direct sales guy or from some website somewhere. Usually I found it either in a trade show, and that's how I knew I needed one, right? Like I went to a trade show and somebody had this cool thing like, hey, we could really use that. Or some value-added resale brought, I needed a new firewall, and they said, oh, by the way, here's this intrusion detection device you can set off to the side. That's what theirs kind of was. Like, you should set this off to the side, and it'll tell you if something's going on, right? You'll know things about these industries that a lot of these guys, especially if they're new founders, if this is their first or second gig, they never even knew of. You'll have connections and relationships with vendors and resale groups and other stuff they just may never have. You can bring things to the table that they couldn't imagine. So
yeah, and I think the other aspect is that when you're a founder, it's somewhat easier to get advisors, people who meet you once a week or once a month and give you a bunch of advice. But I found that basically makes your to-do list longer and longer, and and then the actual implementation of that advice, you may or may not have the skill set to do it. So that's why I thought it was quite valuable, and I've seen that to pan out to be the case, to have somebody who not just comes up with ideas or strategy or advice, but then actually rolls up their sleeve and executes on it. So that's where the space where we play in, where we not only come up with advice or ideas, but then actually help execute, which is often the shortfall for many founders.
you lose a lot of advisors this way too, because I have a phrase for it. I call them assholes, right? You'll ask me for my advice, and then you never do it, right? Hey, can I pick your brain for a few minutes? Can I take you to coffee? It's like, like, oh sure, like what would you do if if you were me? And we go through all this, like we run through everything. I do the deep work. I ask the right questions to make sure I can answer the question properly. An hour later, I say, okay, here's your plan. Step 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you find out a month later, 2 later, they just continue to do what they've always done. They didn't use any of it, right? And I was like, so by the second or third time they do that, you're like, look, I'm not even going to coffee with you. You don't take any of the advice I give you, right? And I've learned over time, most people, when they ask for advice, they don't really want your advice. They want you to confirm an existing idea they already had in their own head.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. They wanted clarification that they're on the right path. They did not want to change paths. So if your advice ends up, hey, change path, don't do what you're planning on doing there, it's usually not going to work.
Yeah.
But with you being there to put the hands on, the reason a lot of times it doesn't work, I think, is because I already know what I wanted to do. I already have a plan to do it. I already know what the next step to do it is before I ask for that help. And you told me to do something else. I kind of feel like I got to go back to the, starting wheel, as opposed to let me just try what I was going to try anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, we always feel that we must be right. The ideas that we have, especially if we're emotionally tied into it, then we often feel that it must be right, and I just need to try. I'm so close, I just want to try it out. But that may or may not be the right course of action for the business.
Course correction is something that most great, at least in my experience, most great chief operating officers are the best at, right? They're at best at measuring something along the way and going, hey, this is off track now. Something happened along the way, And I've been at a few tech startups where we had a great chief operating officer. I've reported a couple of them as like senior director of operations, where I was the head of all operations, but I didn't report to a VP of, finance or something. I reported to some COO, and they look at numbers, come back and go, hey, you may not be seeing this, but you're no longer at 5 nines. You've got this product over here that's causing a revenue impacting outage. I was like, it's only been twice down this week, this month, and they come back and go, yeah, but both times it was down for 2.5 hours, cost, and they could give me insights into in things that would help me grow. How do you go about with these small business owners being able to track all? I mean, how long does it take you to come in and know what you need to track, and how often you need to have these conversations? Is it take a while to really get in and learn their operations? My question, what I'm going for, because we're running out of time here, is I hire you, you come in, you start working. How long is it before you're at full swing, where you're in the system, you know what's going on, you're integrated in well enough that you're making a meaningful impact? Is it day one, or is it a month or two in? What's the learning curve?
Yeah, in that first week, you're immediately going to feel a difference. When somebody comes in with a higher level of skill set than you're used to, you'll immediately feel it in every conversation and in every interaction. And the speed that they move at, when you're working fractionally, you have to make sure every hour that you spend is valuable. So that means that the people in the team are going to start feeling it in that first week itself. Usually in that first month, by the end of that first month, is when we've kind of come up with our assessment, our recommendations, and here's the areas that we should focus on. And we most likely, once we've got an agreement in the areas to focus on, we'll also have, okay, here's the key metrics that need to be tracked that'll help us now figure out what to do next. And we'll already have a plan in place on how we should proceed. So in that first month, you're going to actually start seeing a lot of action already happening and taking place, and things starting to move. Usually in that first 3 months is when you'll have completed some significant projects, where you'll now start seeing the results in a meaningful way to the business. So yeah, first week you'll feel the difference. First month you'll feel the strategy and the direction will already be in place, and the plans will be in place. And by month 3, you'll already start seeing major results.
That's really great. That's actually a lot faster than I thought it'd be. I thought it'd take a little while to get in and kind of learn how the gears turn, right? How systems are. But having the experience of done this over and over and over again, there are simplistic, universal kind of concepts between business to business. A B2B business is going to be like another B2B business up to a certain level, right? A business, to consumer business is going to be like most others to a certain level, right? There's nuances and uniqueness about every company, but I guess the core set, per industry, per who they're servicing, the core components need to be there. So, how do people reach out to you and work with you? What's the best way to reach out to you, find out more about what you do, and if you're a right fit for them?
Yeah, so scaleupexec.com is our website, and on there you can actually book time directly with me. I'm happy to, even if you're not necessarily looking for a CEO, I find it's valuable once you've learned something that it's valuable to share it with others. So you can actually book time directly with me, even if you're just wanting to get some ideas or get some thoughts to help with your business. So that's actually the best place. Otherwise, on my LinkedIn as well, I think in the show notes, there'll probably be my LinkedIn URL. So they can also reach out and even book time with me directly through my LinkedIn profile.
Okay. And then if somebody wants to do this, is there a time commitment? Do you guys work off of equity? Is there a work off of like a salaried, or you call it a contract fee? Is it a combination? How does that normally?
So for me, it's important for everything to be very simple. So no equity. It's a straight monthly retainer. We have a 1 hour a day, 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day plan, depending on what level of engagement is needed. And it's just a fixed monthly retainer for each of them. So typically, like the smallest size business we've worked with is like around $1 million in revenue a year, or they've raised if they're pre-revenue, they've raised maybe $1 million or more. At that point, then the numbers end up working out. And probably the largest size company we've so far worked with is a couple hundred people in the company kind of range. So it's pretty sizable range from small to medium size that we end up working with and are affordable for.
Awesome. Sounds like you guys have a pretty well put together plan. You've had a few exits in the background. Let's wrap this up with a couple lessons learned. If somebody's out there, they're thinking about selling their company, they'd like to fine tune it, maybe they want to work with you and stuff. What are some of the lessons you've learned from previous exits that you're going to be able to help them avoid the having the same problem?
Yeah. Firstly, understand who could be a potential buyer. That's really important. Like, for example, if it's a strategic sale, so let's say you've got an interesting piece of tech and you want to sell it to a large tech company, they may not care about revenue or profit of your business. So you want to try and understand that buyer, what are they actually interested in? Maybe they're interested in your user base. Maybe they're interested in some other metric or parameter. So if you understand that metric or the things that they really care about, if they were to buy you, then you optimize that. You don't optimize profit or EBITDA or whatever else. But let's say your potential acquirer is a PE firm or an individual, they may actually care about EBITDA. And so now you start optimizing based on that. And there may be, like that, you're trying to understand all the different parameters that somebody who's going to buy you would be interested in. And then now you really work towards optimizing that. That's the first thing. Many people end up optimizing for things that are completely irrelevant to that buyer that they're after. And now you might not actually get the best valuation or exit outcome that you'd need. So that, I think that's one of the most important things. There's probably 1,000 other things I could talk about, but I'll just give that one nugget for now.
I tell people a lot of times, that, like, look, if you're going to go, there's it takes 3 to 5 years to prep for an exit to do it right, and that's to get your finances right, to get your company right, and the longer periods are if you're going to go for that strategic exit, you better have a backup plan that if I had one guy, he's like, I'm selling my software company to Google. Like, cool, what happens when Google doesn't buy it, right? Like, cause he's totally gearing up. He's paying attention to what type of tools they use, what type of in development environment they use. He's building something that would be really easy for them to integrate, and he's paying attention to the right things. I get that, but what are you going to do when they say no, right? Are you building something so unique that to that particular strategic acquire that nobody else is going to want it, or are you building something that okay, now all I have to do is tweak my EBITDA and my profits, and I can sell it to anybody? So there is some concern with like the timeline, right? If you're gearing up to sell to one of, I would say if you're trying to sell strategically to a strategic buyer, you probably have between 1 and 5 out there that would take it, right?
Mm.
That's your mindset. It once you get told no by those guys, what's next, right?
That's a
So
really good point.
that retooling part of that is like just be ready to know that if you get told no or whatever, it's like the question is, what do I need to do to make it worthy for them to want it, or do I need to set back and play the EBITDA game and and get this ready for the open market? Cool. Uh, 3 takeaways real quick. If somebody they don't remember anything else about the show, I can only walk away with 2 or 3 things. What would you want them to walk away with?
I think first is understand your own motivational factors
Hmm.
and be okay with that. Sometimes there's actually resistance that we have inside of us for what actually motivates us and demotivates us, and what our ambition, how that ties into what our ambition is. So if you understand what your ambition is for your business and what actually motivates you and doesn't motivate you, that can now help you figure out everything else, like what trajectory to have in the business, who else you need to bring in to fill in the gaps. I think that's really important. So that honesty with yourself. Secondly, I think actually I guess there were two things in there. One is that eventual goal that you want to have that's based on where your what your motivational factors are, and then I guess third would be trying to make sure that based on where you're trying to get to, what are the gaps that currently exist in your team, in your business, on the revenue side, on the cost side, really trying to understand those gaps. And those gaps are now what you need to address. So if it kind of all flows together, if you understand your own motivation, you understand your goals, and then now you take that down into what are the gaps that exist to help you achieve those goals. Now you can actually start working on filling those gaps.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for being here today. Hang out for a few seconds. Afterwards, we're going to call that a show.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Sponsored by DueDilio. Looking to buy or sell a business? Assembling the right team is essential for success, and that's where DueDilio comes in. DueDilio is the go-to platform for hiring top M&A service providers, including attorneys, deal advisors, and due diligence experts. With a network of over 250 highly vetted professionals and boutique firms, they connect you with the expert you need for a seamless M&A journey. Whether you're acquiring your first business, growing your portfolio, or preparing for a sale, DueDilio makes building your deal team easy and efficient. And best of all, their matching service is completely free. Visit DueDilio.com and assemble your winning team today.